Hello everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Unbox It with Africa. This episode will be done virtually. I want to introduce you to Mr. Benjamin Mbakwe. Mr. Benjamin is a results-driven development consultant with over 25 years of experience across the United Nations. He is also an international development organization and indigenous civil society organization expert. His expertise includes delivering human development projects with a strong focus on human rights, gender equality, and child protection. Mr. Benjamin, we're pleased to have you in the studio today.
Thank you very much.
Female genital mutilation is a really pressing issue. It's affecting a million of women and girls across Africa, and the consequences of female genital mutilation are numerous. We can see health challenges, we know there are physical challenges, and even mental consequences to whoever has undergone FGM. Well, can you quickly run us down through the procedures that are involved in this harmful practice?
Like you mentioned, FGM as defined by the World Health Organization is any procedure that involves the partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or any other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. It's a cultural practice that violates the rights of women and has no known health benefits. So there are basically 4 types of FGM, and each one has its own level of severity. Type 1, which is called a clitoridectomy, involves the partial or total removal of the clitoris or the clitoral hood. The next is type 2, which is excision. It involves the total or partial removal of the clitoris or clitoral hood and removal of the labia minora and sometimes the removal of the labia majora. Type 3, which is the most severe form of FGM, is called infibulation. It involves the removal of the external organs that I mentioned, as well as the narrowing of the vaginal opening and repositioning of the labia, which means that the external genital area is stitched up, leaving just a little opening for the person to pass menstrual blood and urine. Type 4, which involves a lot of things, depending on the community you look at, can include things like cauterization, using like a hot knife to burn off part of the genital organ. It can involve scraping, incision, but one of the key things that happens around Nigeria and in Imo State and Southeast particularly is the one that is called massaging. This is where the mother or the mother-in-law or family members or the in-laws use hot water or petroleum jelly to desensitize the external genitalia, the clitoris, and also try to push it back, which is why in a lot of settings, once a female child is born and the wife's mother or the husband's mother is coming to help her nurse the baby, one of the first things they buy is a pack of the petroleum jelly, which will be used in massaging the clitoris. And many people do not even understand that this also constitutes a part of female genital mutilation.
This happening around Africa, I'm sure that there are laws that are being enforced. So can you tell us, are there laws that are enforced to stop the practice of FGM? And if so, how are leaders and community leaders, how do they respond to these laws being effected?
Well, there's legislation, starting at the international level. You have the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that's CEDAW. So at the international level, it has been recognized as a violation, and there's a convention. Also, the Convention on the Rights of the Child also is one of the conventions that looks at ending all forms of discrimination against the female child, which also involves female genital mutilation. Even at the African Union level, there's what they call the Maputo Protocol, which looks at the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights and Rights of Women in Africa. So at the international level, there are conventions that countries sign on to. But then coming down to the national level, like Nigeria, we have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015. This is a federal law that applies only in Abuja, but that has criminalized the practice of FGM. Now, at the state level, Nigeria has 36 states, and 35 of those states, except Kano State, have domesticated the violence against persons prohibition law. And each state, determines the severity of the punishment for people who perform FGM, amongst other laws or sanctions that are listed in that document. But the thing is, when you focus only on legislation as a way of ending female genital mutilation, you run the risk of driving the practice on the ground. So, usually countries are recommended that laws should be something coming either at the middle of your program or towards the end, but starting with community engagements, health education, engaging community leaders, because you are wondering how religious leaders and community leaders are responding to these laws. Remember, this is a practice that is tied to culture and misleadingly tied to religion. So people are hanging on to it as part of their identity. So if you bring out your legislation without first engaging the people, they would go under and the practice will continue and you won't get any cases reported. So, but once the laws are there, the first thing you now do is to begin to educate people about the existence of the law, begin to set up the systems that will help to operationalize that law, including setting up safe houses where maybe girls who are running away from being caught, can be housed. Because under the VAP law, there are safe spaces that are created, where people who are trying to escape these forms of violence can also be kept while the government intervenes. So they are responding to these laws based on the level of information they have, the understanding they have, and then the most important thing is that you need the support of the community for these laws to function. Because if the community has not accepted to end this practice, there will be underreporting, quotas will be protected, and then people who are caught will be prevented from going to report those cases. So laws exist, but for them to be effective, there has to be collaboration between government and the community members where these practices are taking place.
Speaking of, there has to be collaboration. So what do you think, how do you think that government and the community leaders can collaborate, work together? Because these laws exist, just like you said, but we need to drive awareness to let people know that there are laws that are banning, that are against female genital mutilation. So how can we bring about that collaboration between government and the community members?
Okay, thank you. First of all, there needs to be a policy framework, that guides whatever response the country has. Like in Nigeria, we have the National Policy and Plan of Action on the Elimination of Female Genital Mutilation in Nigeria. The current one is from 2021 to 2025. So that policy document spells out the different roles that government, international organizations, non-governmental organizations like Youth Hub Africa, and also community members, the roles that they have to play, both in community education, other aspects of the response, as well as enforcement of the legislation. So the first thing is systemic intervention. Have the legislation, have a policy document that guides what needs to be done. Then the next thing is to set up structures that will help you to operationalize that policy. For example, in Nigeria, at the national level, we have the National Technical Committee on Female Genital Mutilation. At the state level, we have the State Technical Committee on Female Genital Mutilation. We also have at the local government.
Just like we know, FGM has a lot of effects for those that have undergone the procedure. So can you let us know the mental, what effects does FGM have mentally for the people that have undergone this practice?
The effect of FGM on survivors, can be both immediate and long-term. And it also depends on the stage where the person underwent the procedure. For example, a lady who was caught at birth, because there are people who perform the practice, within the first 8 days of birth. So the person grows up not knowing actually that some part of their body has been removed. They don't feel so self-conscious. They don't understand there's any difference between them and some other woman until maybe either they learn it in biology class or they see other ladies, then they may understand that there's something different about them. But then there are those who this practice is done when they're adolescents, just before they reach puberty, because they're rite of passage. Sometimes it's done to a pregnant woman before delivery, during delivery, and after delivery. So depending on the stage when it's done, that's when the trauma is more severe when it's done to a grown-up. Because sometimes when it's being done, you need about 4 or 5 people to hold down the person. When it is done in the community setting, a lot of time without any form of anesthesia, they have to hold down her legs so that she doesn't struggle. Someone sits on her chest so she won't see what is going on, and then the cutting takes place. So it is very traumatic and severe. Wow. In such situations, the person may end up having PTSD. Once in a while, if they hear about FGM, it could trigger up memories of what they had to go through. And then the person also becomes conscious of their body. If they have to visit a gynecologist and they know that they need to be examined, then knowing that, there's something has been taken away from them, they become self-conscious, when such time comes, and it can lead to anxiety, depression, and then also difficulty for those people who marry. Because they've removed the clitoris and part of the external genital organ, there's pain during sex, and sometimes the women can no longer reach orgasm because of the removal of the physical part of their body. So these are all the different things that can happen to people who have undergone this practice. But the key thing is, at what point was it done? If it was done to a grown-up, the pain is more severe, and then the likelihood of remembering what the person underwent is always there. But if it was done to the person as a child, they may not have those flashbacks, but they will still experience those challenges. And also, during delivery, because of the stitching up of the body parts, it's difficult for the woman to dilate and for labor to take place normally. So a lot of times they have to undergo episiotomy, meaning that they need to receive a cut, before they can deliver their children and all of that. So there are lots of challenges, but it differs from one individual to the other.
No matter the stage in which this was done, it's a really, really severe thing, and we need to work together to ensure that this practice is eradicated. So for these people that have undergone or that have gone through this procedure, are there systems in place for survivors that are going through a lot of psychological trauma? Are there systems in place for them?
There are, but it depends it differs from one location to the other. First of all is counseling, psychological counseling and therapy. This is something that, especially for those who underwent the practice as teenagers or adults, it's important to have this service available for them. Then at the group level, we also have survivors groups, which the interventions in Nigeria are now setting up, meaning that in different communities, women who have undergone this practice are now coming together, to support each other, through their meetings and providing access to them to where they can get help. We, outside Nigeria, because I don't know if it's actually done here, the people also undergo reconstructive surgery, where they try to recreate or try to get the person as much as possible back to where they were at the beginning. But you and I know that, once those body parts are harmed and those surgeries are done, it will not return 100% to what it used to be. But those services are available. So counseling is available for women who have undergone FGM. It helps them to deal with the situation, learn how to manage, even what to expect. For those who are pregnant, for example, when they attend antenatal clinics, female genital mutilation is one of the topics that are treated in all primary healthcare facilities in Nigeria. So their pregnant women are told about FGM, so that if they have undergone the practice, they may begin to make options for elective cesarean section, meaning that they don't have to go through the trauma of trying to force and deliver the normal way. Then also, there are those who have not undergone it, but it's something that exists in their community. They are made to become aware of it. Because in some part of Nigeria, once the woman is undergoing labor, that is when they do the cutting. Because the pain of labor is such that she may not even notice that that is done to her. And the reason why it's done in those communities is that they believe that cutting off the clitoris will prevent the baby from dying at childbirth. So communities have different reasons why they do that, and then at what point that they also carry out those interventions. So yes, there are services, but it differs from one location to the other.
We all know that a lot has been done, a lot of advocacies have been done to eradicate this harmful practice, but yet it still seems like we have a lot to do Especially, there are still communities that still practice this harmful, that still carry out this harmful practice. So what do you think are the obstacles? What do you think are the obstacles that are making us not to really get to the root of this matter?
The number one thing is cultural issues. Remember, this is a practice that has been passed down from generation to generation. It forms a kind of identity for the people who engage in it. In some places in Nigeria and a lot in East Africa, having undergone FGM enables you to get married. So it's something that is like an access to marriage. So meaning that a woman who is not caught will not get married. The men will not marry her because they see her as unclean and all of that. So people want to undergo the practice so that they can get married. Now, also, there are people who are cutters, who are earning income from this practice. They're also fighting for fighting to prevent it from ending, because that is how they earn income. You know, is for economic reasons. It's also one of those reasons that we have it. Then there's lack of education and awareness. A lot of people are not even aware that what they do to a child, maybe within the first eight days of birth, can become a problem for her, 20, 30 years later when she wants to have a child. So they don't have that connection between the practice and those negative outcomes. So lack of awareness is a huge problem. Then the other thing is also religious misconception. Both Christianity and Islam do not support FGM. But there are people who erroneously feel that the cutting of a child, like in the Bible, on the 8th day, means both male and female. So that is the reason why they undergo that practice. But once that awareness is there, then the people can actually stop that. So when you look at it, you're looking at cultural issues as a barrier, means it has to be tackled. You're looking at religious misconceptions that needs to be addressed. You're looking at lack of awareness and education for the people. You're even looking at the absence of legal instruments, because in some places, if there's no legislation that criminalizes the practice, then people believe that it's a cultural thing and they have to uphold their culture. Then last but not the least is lack of political will.
How can the government, even non-governmental organizations and individual organizations, there are lots of people that want to see the end of this, because it is not a pleasant practice. It's not even meant to be practiced anymore, even in this 21st century. So what can you say, what can we do together to ensure that this, by 2030, according to the SDG 5, which is gender equality, we need to see that this practice is eradicated, at least by year 2030. So what can we do? What is the one thing? Is there anything that we are not doing right? Or what is the one thing that you feel we should do? We need to collaborate to ensure that this practice is eradicated.
You've mentioned one of the most important things that need to be done, that is collaboration. Meaning that everybody must come together, to join hands to address the issue. But there's one fundamental area that we are overlooking. That is that the practice is changing. In the past, it was done mainly to women, adolescents, but currently the age of cutting is reducing across all the countries, 17 countries where the joint program is taking place. It's been noticed that the age of cutting is reducing. Reason being that, one, the older the people are, the more likely they will resist. They have information, they know what to do. So people are now cutting babies. Like in Nigeria, based on the last 2018 National Demographic Health Survey, 19.2% of children aged between 0 to 15 are caught in Nigeria. But when you look at that number, about 19% of them are caught before their first birthday. So meaning that cutting is taking place within households. So for us to really eradicate this problem means that our intervention should focus more on working with communities and families, so that when people are newly getting married, as part of the counseling they receive, before marriage, they will talk to them about FGM, so they become aware. Communities need to set up surveillance systems that will help to track families where there's a pregnant woman, there's a newborn baby, to ensure that the cutting does not take place. Because the cutting is now taking place within households at a very early age, even before the government system, alarm systems, will pick up that it has been done. So right now we're at the end of the conveyor belt, seeing cases in the hospital. But if we're able to work with families, then we can stop couples from performing that on their children with the support of the extended family and the community.
Wow, thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin. This session has been really, really insightful and inspiring at the same time. And I hope our listeners are also getting inspired by by the words and by your explanations and by the clarification that you are giving on the subject matter. And I hope that this episode has shed some light on the complexities surrounding FGM. And I hope this episode has also inspired you to take action, either by advocating, either by educating, or maybe just supporting the survivors. And make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share to everyone around your network, your friends, your family, even people outside Nigeria in the diaspora. And your support is going to help us a long way in bringing conversations like this to a lot of people. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and together we can make a difference. Bye.